Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you currently are. My name is Joel Comerford. For those who are joining us again, welcome. It is good to see you. And those who are joining us for the first time, it is a pleasure to be hosting you today. So, Lawpath is Australia's leading online legal platform based over here in Sydney, serving over 500,000 small to medium businesses for over 10 plus years. We provide company registrations, legal documents, and affordable legal accounting and tax services. Subscription-based models saving businesses over 100 million in legal and accounting fees. And for general inquiries, visit our website, LinkedIn, YouTube, and FAQ. To speak with customer service, type yes in the general group chat if you are on the platform as well and you just want to, I guess, get some general information. Now, on today's agenda, we will be covering a step-by-step guide to creating customized legal documents. At Lawpath, we are as much a software and tech company as we are a legal and accounting provider, and we have the awards to prove it. We continuously improve our legal documents and software to enhance the user's experience. We've built an intuitive platform that allows Australian business owners to create professionally drafted, customizable legal documents in just under 5 to 15 minutes, roughly, and with both AI-driven tools and human assistance as well. So today's session, guiding you today will be Edwin Zorilla, an admitted lawyer and Lawpath's product manager for legal documentation. So Edwin will be essentially covering accessing the right legal information, using the document builder, meeting formal document requirements, which is very important, and of course, our Lawpath AI, which is very exciting for those who are joining us for the first time. We'll conclude today with a Q&A and document improvement suggestions. For those who have been using our documents, here is your opportunity to offer as much feedback as possible. And please submit topic-related questions in the designated Q&A chat as well, which I will put up. And if you want to stay until the end for free legal advice from our lawyers, you can go ahead and check out the links for more, which I will put down below here. And that should be it from me. So now over to you, Edwin.
Thanks, Joel, and hello to everyone who's joining. So I will just begin by sharing my screen so you can all see the presentation that will guide you through the lessons that I want to impart. So, okay, here we go. So number one is doc guidance, what it is and where to find it. And this is really important because a lot of users jump straight into the document without really knowing if it's the right document for them, without really knowing how to use it, without seeing the bright lines they should not cross if they want it to be enforceable. So there are a lot of things you need to know in order to make a good document for your business. Our questionnaires function like workflows. We have workflows, but the reason I'm making this analogy is because sometimes you won't have all the information you need from the get-go. And so it'll give you a series of tasks to fulfill. And every step matters. So we're talking things like party details, transaction details, legal terms, and how the document is to be signed. These are all separate parts of the document that you should be familiar with. And the way we structure these generally reflect this order. Now, these may not chart a linear path to the document. So if you go through the questionnaire on the left, you may see the document jumping up and down all around. So with a lot of the tools that we're implementing, it does empower users to take a non-linear journey through a document. This is particularly useful for users who have completed a document many times before. However, if you're doing it for the first time, it's important to go through it step by step, even if it seems to sort of jump around the document on the right. So yeah, if you don't know how to answer a question in the questionnaire, it's an indication that you're not ready to complete a document. And however easy it may seem to click through to the end, you should keep this in mind. We have all these tools that allow you to seek answers from others or to skip the questions to be completed at a later stage. But these are important things to bear in mind. So, however, we also provide you information that will help you answer these questions in many forms. And the most important of these forms is the document summary. So the document summary is the first thing you see when you click on the title of a document, as opposed to just clicking on going straight to making the document. And the reason that this is important is because it gives you all the information, the legal information that you may not be familiar with, sort of from common industry usage of a document. This includes how documents must be signed and any post-execution steps are required, such as lodging of deeds, titles, and exchange of documents. It shows you where you can and can't edit documents. So, for instance, people may be inclined to go directly onto the document on the right panel to start copying and pasting things. However, with certain documents, especially things like wills and powers of attorney and statutory declarations, if you start editing certain parts of the document, it'll become invalid. So we lay that out. We lay out other useful documents, which can sometimes mean documents that are needed to complete a transaction that you're undertaking, or it can sometimes highlight that maybe there's a document that's more useful for you, more specific to your circumstances. And they also highlight circumstances where you might need legal advice to complete a document. And in that case, the document should be seen as sort of a way of speeding up and familiarizing you with the various steps that a lawyer will take you through, but should not be carried out independent of that legal advice. So please always pay close attention to the summary page. There will be areas that are bolded. There will be links to articles explaining things. There might also be just general information about what's contained in the document and other names for a document that is more sort of, was put there from a marketing perspective, but the information that you need is always clear. So let me give you an example. For instance, the discretionary trust deed, which is one of the riskiest documents that you can make because it generally deals with large amounts of money. It establishes quite close relationships between parties. And it generally has tax implications. We recommend here that you seek advice from a qualified professional before using the deed. I think it takes you through stamp duty, the context where it's most useful, and some of the issues that may be created around land tax. So yeah, these are things that are important to know about. So once you're on the document, we also provide you with tips and common answers about how to fill in the document sections and what the significance of making certain choices will be. These tips and common answers will be supplemented by AI. However, I personally have drafted these tips in order to make sure that you get the most specific advice for each question. So, for instance, it may not be clear from the question of the value of the services, how this will change the document. Once you click yes or no, the document on the right will immediately scroll to the change that your answer has made. So this will give you some indication, but then there's a quick explainer about how this value relates to limitations of liability. Secondly, it will help you make sound commercial choices. People may not understand what the importance of a clause protecting parties' intellectual property is. They may not understand that clauses like this may protect one party at the expense of another, and that they may be more useful in certain circumstances than others. So this is something that we generally explain. And finally, you may have questions with a bit of jargon, like drag-along rights. And so we explain what they are and also what kind of range you should be looking at. None of this should be taken as legal advice. So why do we say this? Are we just protecting ourselves? It's to protect you, essentially, because besides our documents, there's a lot of information on our blogs and all throughout the internet and information that you can sort of make any AI tool give you that sounds legalistic, that sounds like it may be the one solution to your problem. However, unless you've sat down with a professional who analyzes some of the specific circumstances that you're working with, you can't be sure that this is the right solution for you, because the law is like a labyrinth. Like, it contains all these exceptions, all these subclauses that will create further implications for you. So it's to protect you. We don't want you to treat things that are intended as guidance as the final word on a whole bunch of things. And the only place you won't find this disclaimer is when you talk to one of our lawyers, because then they're actually giving you legal advice. That's what you're paying for through the legal advice plan or through Marketplace. We'll prompt you to seek legal advice in areas that where you actually need them. So here are some do's and don'ts for using the doc library and the builder. Firstly, here are some quick tips for finding the right document. So there's no difference between an agreement and a contract. No matter how it's used in industry, no matter where you may see it or not, they're the same thing. So if you looking for an agreement and you find a contract, then it may well be suited to your circumstances. We sometimes change the names of documents for SEO purposes, from agreement to contract, or just sort of minor tweaks. We may add some words of information to the end. But as long as the document description tells you this document you need, then you're in the right place. Jurisdiction is also very important. So there are jurisdiction questions attached to a lot of documents, but sometimes it may be that the state that you're in will make such a change to legal circumstances that it will determine whether one or another document on the platform is right for you. In that case, we'll put in brackets whether it's appropriate for Victoria or New South Wales, and you want to make sure that you're using the right one. Sometimes there'll be more information about how jurisdictions affect you in the document description. Australia is itself a jurisdiction. However, most contractual matters begin in state court, so it's important for you to understand the jurisdiction of your transaction, or, for instance, your lease and so on. And yeah, Australian and state jurisdictions will interact, but generally it's always important to specify the state that you're working with. Did I break my document? So we get queries about people who are just unable to go further with their documents. So the most important thing is that you'll see these sort of yellow boxes on your document that correspond with questions in the questionnaire. If you delete these or sometimes modify them in certain ways, there's really no way for the corresponding question, like the input in the questionnaire, to enter the document. So you're kind of on your own once you do that, and we highly recommend you don't do that, or at least you go through the document and as a whole questionnaire before you decide to start tweaking these. And if you're stuck with a technical issue, reach out to us on Intercom. How do I ensure my document is valid? So this is maybe the most important part of this whole presentation, because there actually is a lot of technicalities that go into designing a document properly that people may not be aware of. So the number one priority is getting your parties right. Who will actually be bound by the document to each other? In the case of an agreement, at least, which is sort of the main example that I want to put forward. So, for instance, let's say you create a non-disclosure agreement between two companies, right? Now, companies are made up of people, but ultimately, if one party breaches an agreement, they'll be responsible to the other party as a whole, which means that the company will have to pay the other company, regardless of the individual who is responsible for the breach, right? So what does this mean? It means that you identify the companies as the parties, but then, for instance, like, think about it as the master agreement, the non-disclosure agreement, right? You then may have confidentiality clauses in the employment agreements between the companies and the employees. So if this employee of party A has breached the company's obligation to party B, then company B will sue company A. But then the individual may be disciplined by company A because there's a separate agreement going on here. Yeah, so that's the main thing you should know. And the parties, identifying the correct parties will determine how you sign the document and how you input details into the document. So for instance, you always make sure that you know the registered address of the company as opposed to the individual home address of an individual. Some agreement terms are one too many. In lawyer speak, these are contracts of adhesion, or as most people know them, terms and conditions. What this means is that you may have like quick agreement that's made by clicking I agree when you are signing up for something or just for paying for something, which is also considered a form of agreeing to an offer, therefore making a contract. However, all the terms and conditions may not be visible when you do that, but there is a link to terms and conditions, which are then automatically incorporated into your agreement. It's very important to be aware of these things. Of course, we don't all like to read the terms and conditions for anything we're signing. AI, however, can be a useful tool in summarizing terms and conditions when understanding them. So we're getting a little off track with this particular point, but yeah, the final point here is that you don't want to get confused between parties and their representatives. So it's not common for companies to use company seals these days. Rather, companies only sign by having individual representatives signing. But the companies are still the parties, it's just they're signed by representatives. And I'll explain what this means now. So the Corporations Act provides two methods of signing. Section 127 execution, which is displayed here on the right, as in you'll be asked a series of questions which will determine whether company director needs to sign, whether two company directors will sign, or whether company director and his secretary will sign. These are the three ways the companies can sign when using Section 127. Section 127, it's more formal and provides more evidence. So if there are more people in the room, so to speak, when signing a document, then that means that the other party has a little more certainty that these are the right people, that the company is actually invested in this agreement, and that it's not just going to say, oh no, those people were not our representatives, right? Because under Section 127, they'd have to be company directors or secretaries. So yeah, these questions help you be compliant to Section 127. However, there's also Section 126 that you can use to sign, and this is a simpler method that involves authorized representatives. So I want to make clear that some lawyers will tell you that you'll need to sign a power of attorney in order for a company to give power to an individual to sign on their behalf. However, this is not actually necessary. It's actually a very simple process, or you can pass a director's resolution just saying this is our representative, whether it be a particular director or an employee within a company or someone else. For instance, a lawyer can often sign on behalf of an entity. And yeah, it's a pretty clear and transparent way of doing things. There's also other ways that someone can become a company representative. For instance, if there's always someone in the room when a deal is taking place and the other party tells you, yep, this is our guy, he'll sign the documents, then under law, that's generally not. But we find that parties generally like to have as much paperwork to verify that they're signing with the right people. So yeah, just to preempt a quick question, anytime that a company is signing a document, e-signing is okay. Some people prefer personal signing, but yeah, e-signing is always okay. Now with partnerships and trusts, which are also commercial entities, it can be a little bit trickier. So for instance, partnerships, it depends on the State Partnership Act. They generally allow partnerships to be bound by the signature of any one partner. However, partnership agreements may change this by requiring specific requirements, such as having two or more partners there to sign every document that combine the partnership. Partners may also appoint agents or attorneys by deed. That's common in some instances. In regards to trustees, trustees may make decisions for how to use trust money according to the terms of the trust. The same goes for attorneys and the powers of attorney. So they can just sign on their own behalf, but then, sorry, they can sign with their own name, but when inputting themselves as a party, they'll generally sign name as trustee for the family trust. You can also just write ATF instead of as trustee for. And this also applies when you have companies acting as corporate trustees. What about deeds? So for companies, signing deeds is the same as signing agreements. You don't need witnessing and it can be done online. However, as we'll get to, witnessing something that some parties prefer just as a way of getting more security. And that's just something you may come across. So when it comes to individuals, individual deed signing is regulated at a state level. So it's not consistent across Australia. Generally, deeds must be witnessed when signed by individuals. And there's different state witnessing requirements. In New South Wales, there's pretty clear guides for how to do online witnessing. And some people decide to do that. However, it's a little bit risky if you've never done it before. And yeah, you want to make sure that it conforms to whatever state you're in. So if you're coming from WA, you generally have to do it in person, for instance. And you may not be familiar with how it's done in New South Wales. So we generally recommend doing wet ink signatures in order to make sure that they're properly signed and witnessed as deeds. However, in Queensland and Victoria, they're just kind of going forward with, the sort of online transition that was ushered in by COVID. And individuals may validly sign deeds on their own behalf, electronically and without a witness. Now, we also want to highlight that a lot of agreements and deeds are signed in a way that we call counterpart signing, which is where you have separate copies, like not all people in the same room. So you have separate copies of the agreements that the individuals sign. Generally, they'll do it simultaneously. They'll sign it, in person, wet ink, and then fax it to each other. This is called counterpart signing. Generally, it's allowed. Courts generally recognize it. Sometimes there are clauses that say that it's allowed in the agreement or the deed. Sometimes there are clauses and deeds that say that they're not allowed. So you should be mindful of when that's the case. And yeah, just I think I may have skipped a section. Individuals can generally sign agreements electronically without witnessing. That's fine. But again, certain parties may demand a little bit more kind of wet ink signatures or witnessing for security. So what about wills, powers of attorney, and statutory declarations? So I highlighted earlier that these have a very particular way of being filled in, that there are things that you cannot change about them if you want them to be enforceable. So please follow the respective guidance and stick within those boundaries, right? So yeah, generally, once you've answered all the questions, the signature blocks will sort of explain themselves. They'll tell you who needs to sign and whether have to insert the name or the date or anything like that. Now, we're rolling out powers of attorney. We've been doing this for a while, but that's because states keep changing the ways that they allow people to sign powers of attorney. But hopefully at some point we'll have them all on the website. So where a document is not available for certain where a document is available for certain jurisdictions but not for others, it's because the legal requirements for completing documents may not be compatible with our platform or any online platform, right? So for instance, you have a Victorian will, which is a separate document, and it says that signing it through e-signature is But then you have a will for all other states where you're not able to sign an enforceable will online. You have to do it in person. Please be mindful of that. Don't try to use a will from one state for another state jurisdiction. Yeah, so this just sort of reiterates some of the points I made that some people may just ask you to witness a document, even though it's not legally required. And also contracts for the sale of land do need to be witnessed under state legislation. So how do our documents evolve over time? Firstly, we update documents in accordance with legislative changes. This is an example of an email on the right that we sent about family and domestic violence leave in regards to employment agreements. On documents, you'll be able on the document summary page, you'll be able to see where a document is last been updated. So this sort of gives you an understanding of how recently something is updated, but rest assured, when new legislation comes around, we are aware of it and we do tell our clients and we do update our document. But if you started a document before we made a change and then we republished it with the change implemented, it won't just auto-populate with your details you already input. You have to start the document again. So how do we stay up to date? We subscribe to a range of newsletters and are informed by various industry organizations. We also have a lot of partners from different industries that will tell us when things are coming into force. And we also regularly look through notice boards where legislative and regulatory changes are announced. So just to give you a quick explainer, you may have a piece of legislation being announced is going through Parliament, and then you see all these articles about how sometimes a little bit scary about how what places will have to change the way they do things. Generally, the law will have to pass first and receive royal assent, but then the legislation will say it either starts immediately, it starts when the regulations say that it starts, or it will start on a particular date. So we'll update our documents and provide guidance in line with the dates when those changes will be implemented, and we'll let you know about those particular dates. Also, yeah, our lawyers, the documents team, and our CEO regularly communicate about how documents can be replaced, improved, or updated. So yeah, we get queries from people on our LAP calls, also coming in through intercom about whether documents are in line with some changes or whether they can add something to help them, have a clause that's suited to their industry, and that's something that we always listen to. We also added and removed documents. So over the last few months, we've added a suite of not-for-profit documents. We've added equipment sale terms and conditions. And we have a few retail lease agreements. We often get requests for agreements from different states. So we're about to publish a retail lease agreement that is applicable for all states. And then there's a question asking you what state you're in, and that will change the document significantly to make sure that it's in line with state legislation. We also have some accounting documents in line with our accounting offerings. Because of the nature of accounting, documents are sort of more a little more table-based and boilerplate. So we have a few here that are adaptable, and then there's others where you may need to talk to accountant if you want to make them. So yeah, we include there a few resolutions regarding costs. Now I want to introduce a section on AI by doing a quick demo. Right. So that's an introduction to some of our new tools. Obviously, this signals a bit of a change to the more old school way of doing documents that I was taught when going through law school and when practicing. And also, by the very nature of these tools, uh, they are the document production process becomes less linear and it expands beyond what lawyers are able to give you on request. It's because AI is designed to integrate a whole bunch of different things, not just the document itself, not just industry information, not just judgments and legislation, which are things that lawyers will look at, but also your own personal profile, the prompts that you give AI. And so, yeah, through all those inputs, we've created 3 tools. That's integrated draft, suggestions, and insights. As that video already showed. And please, if you have any questions about this tool, feel free to pop them in the chat, and I'll sort of answer them as I go. As you know, this might be a little bit new to some of our customers. So I just want to give you a sense for why we've integrated AI into our platform. So yeah, many legal questions are important, but easily answerable. So there's a lot of questions that people approach us with, where the answers are available on the Fair Work website. And we've found that AI can generally scan all those answers and give people quite accurate guidance without needing to know too much about their circumstances because they're quite general. But then, if you want to start asking more questions specific to your circumstances, then you can prompt it and it will either give you an answer or tell you to seek further legal advice. We've also found that communication between people like me and people who have less sort of legal knowledge can suffer from a jargon problem, and AI can be quite good at unpacking a lot of this jargon. So that's built into the tools, but you can also use Simplify by just highlighting text and it will unpack things for you. AI can also provide industry-specific insights that lawyers may not have at their disposal. And yeah, we wanted to provide a way of accessing that information that is available to all of our users. So this is to say that we don't necessarily validate every single output that the AI is giving you. But that's kind of the point, right? And so for this reason, we ask that you, if you have any doubt or if you're about to rely on guidance that's been given to you by the AI, and you're just sort of focusing on that and not looking, for instance, at Fair Work or other bits of guidance, then please seek legal advice before implementing the guidance that it's given you so that we can make sure that it's in line with your circumstances. So just to give you a little bit more context about these tools. So yeah, suggestions, scan, all of the inputs that I mentioned. I want to highlight that these clauses quite often just extensions of existing provisions. So sometimes people will see these clauses and they'll think, oh, like, why do I need this new thing? Is the underlying document not enough for my circumstances? Why, like, is it doubling up on things that are already in the document? You can only answer these questions by looking at the suggestions themselves and comparing it with the questionnaire, which is, again, the most important part of the document, and the document that we've given you, and deciding whether it's appropriate for what you need. You can always reject AI suggestions, by the way. They're just suggestions. Now with insights, kind of like a traffic light system, right? So we want to give you a sense for what the riskier parts of documents are and what the less risky parts of your documents are. Just because you see risks highlighted on your document doesn't mean there's something wrong with the document. It may mean, for instance, that the document is biased towards one party, so risky for the other. It may mean that there are contingencies that you want to take into account and add more detail to the document to make sure that it covers all your circumstances. It may mean that once you implement a certain clause, it will give you an administrative burden that you have to take care of. However, these are things that are part and parcel of doing an illegal transaction. We're just helping you be more aware of it and also give you a sense for the kinds of things that you may want to seek legal advice for. So, how are we maximizing the potential of AI? We constantly test and refine AI to make sure that its outputs are as accurate as we can make them and appropriate to the questions people ask. We also constantly search for new use cases for AI. So yeah, where like the suggestion and insights tools are part of a set of review functions that we're providing to customers. So we also have a review tool, but we're trying to break that down as much as possible in order to give customers ways of getting immediate feedback on both their inputs and what's going on in the document itself. And yeah, I want to highlight again that AI works best when it complements existing services, which includes the guidance that you get through document descriptions and the legal advice that you get through the legal advice plan. How well can I trust AI? It depends on the kind of document. So I highlighted that a lot of employment guidance is generally both quite high level, general, and accurate. But then there are specific employment documents that you have to be more mindful of, like fixed term employment agreements. Then there's a lot of low stakes documents like letters, and sometimes AI will just help you provide the right tone or a little bit more detail to help you follow up with your query with the person that you send the letter to. AI maybe a little bit less reliable when it comes to larger documents, simply because we don't want to give people the idea that they understand an entire document just because AI has given them a couple of insights into it. Sometimes you do have to read the whole thing carefully. AI can struggle with recent changes to legislation, so you always want to make sure that if you've received any notifications about changes or you've gotten advice from our lawyers that something may be unenforceable 6 months down the track because there's new unfair contract terms legislation coming into play, that you focus on that as opposed to guidance you get from an AI. And yeah, once again, it's always important to seek legal advice for final reviews of documents. So just to give an idea of recent queries that we've gotten from people who, well, I find that these generally reflect the limitations of just providing people with guidance about how to use a document, and then them using AI as a way of supplementing that guidance, because guidance is quite general and we can only standardize it so much. So, for instance, how do legislative and award requirements relate to employment agreements? So we often get a question of like, the award for this employee is very complex. Why are all those provisions in the award not included in the agreement? Well, it's because they're incorporated automatically. The agreement doesn't need to include all of them. It helps to have them there in order to have a reference point for both parties. But the agreements that we put on our platform are generally sufficient to the level of detail that employers and employees expect when doing day-to-day business. But it's also important to be aware of the national employment standards and of specific award provisions. How do I decide on governing law jurisdiction? This can be really simple sometimes, but really complicated other times. So for instance, if you have a lease agreement and the property is in a particular state, that's your jurisdiction. If all parties are doing all their business within a certain state, that's your jurisdiction. But then when you have like cross-border transactions or cross-state transactions, it gets a little bit trickier, and you may want to seek legal advice if you're unsure. You can't just shop around for the best jurisdiction, unfortunately. You have to find a jurisdiction where the law actually applies to your document or your transaction. How do I vary the terms of an agreement? So quite often agreements are not completely set in stone, which is to say that you can then decide with the other party later on that you want to change something because it's no longer working for you. The way you do that is generally by implementing a deed of variation. It's important to make it a deed because under the law, if you have an agreement to change an agreement, there's no guarantee that both parties are getting something out of that. And so it may not be enforceable as an agreement. This is sort of a highly technical matter. But with deeds, any changes that you highlight within the deed that you want to make in an agreement will be enforceable. Finally, this is a bonus because we get this question a lot recently. Is someone trying to trademark my business name? This question is generally prompted because someone will receive an email from an official sounding organization saying, we've received a notification that this party is trying to trademark your business name. If they trademark it, you will no longer be able to trade using that name. And so you should get in ahead of them by using our service and pay us money in order to trademark your name. Some like IP Australia has referred to this as a scam. We can't tell you for sure whether these queries are valid, but always be a little bit skeptical of anyone selling you products in this way. And maybe passing off as an official government organization. And feel free to ask us if you come across these issues. So, upcoming changes. We've had a few Privacy Act amendments. Some of these are in force already. Some of them are coming into force in the next few years. This is probably the biggest change that we've seen from the current administration over the last few months. So these are new offences and penalties, including serious invasions of privacy, which is the first of its kind in Australia, and that creates criminal liability. We also have new guidelines for responding to data breaches under Australian Privacy Principles, Principle 11. These won't come into force for a while. Then you have offences against doxing. These create individual liability, and they're coming into force pretty soon, I believe. Then a whitelist for countries with strong data protection laws. These will come into force as the whitelist gets rolled out. So basically, the minister will tell you, these are the countries for which you can say there is like your sorry, just click through the next slide, but I'll finish that off. Your data is being sent to a country that has strong data protection laws when you disclose that information in your privacy policy. And finally, there's a requirement to disclose when personal information is used in automated decision-making. This does not come into force for another 2 years. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that just yet. Now, I'll hand over to Joel just to talk a little bit about this section.
Beautiful. Edwin, thank you so much. As always, your wisdom is extremely useful. Much appreciated. Guys, just to let you know, we will be covering a Q&A shortly. And so if at this point in time you want to post any fresh questions in the Q&A chat, go ahead. Now, in regards to some of the services that we provide, and obviously a lot of what Edwin has covered falls under the Essentials plan, and which obviously ties in with the legal advice, which is super helpful. We've got the main four. These guys are the pillars of Lawpath. So if we're in regards to legal advice, if you're looking at business structuring, purchases and sales of businesses or products, contracts for clients, partners, suppliers, employees, essentially commercial HR employment for that matter, intellectual property and trademarking, debt recovery, commercial law, ESOP or startup law, then naturally the legal advice plan is likely the right resource for your business. Fortunately, we have a 20% off quarterly discount for all attendees today, which I will share the discount code in an email to you all. And then I'll quickly just jump across here to the accounting and tax. So some of our accountants have been at big businesses for a long time. They came to us to help build out our service offering at Lawpath. So the advice you will be getting from them won't likely be the type of advice you'll be getting from general accountants. We're a bit more thorough, or we like to feel like we're a bit more thorough than others, especially from experience from clientele. Now, if it's tax minimization and strategies and deductions, business structuring and restructuring, GST, PAYG, crypto tax, capital gains, the list goes on, payroll, bookkeeping, BAS statements and tax lodgements, then naturally the accounting and tax will be helpful as well. The accounting is separate. Most people, when they hear accounting and then tax, they think the two are together. We've actually split the two up to, I guess, cater to those who might be more proficient with their own taxes and BAS statements, or those who actually have a pre-existing accountant or someone who already assists them with, bookkeeping, invoicing, etc. But the accounting advice plan, much like the legal advice plan, gives you 30-minute consultations with a senior charter accountant. That's 12 months worth of unlimited consultations in regards to your bookkeeping, getting that set up, invoicing. If you're new to the whole employee scheme or ongoing contractors and whatnot, then naturally the legal advice for creating those contracts, and then the accounting for helping you report all the income for both yourself, the business, and your employees. That's all covered there. And then in the tax compliance, if you just first year, some businesses maybe you've been going for a fair bit of time, but if this is your first business, your first company, and you're too busy just trying to get things off the ground, get your head around what you need to do in regards to your roles as a director, employees, etc., then naturally you might not have the time or the patience to have to deal with your own BAS statements and tax returns. This is where the tax compliance plan comes in. If anyone is interested in further information in regards to these plans here, you can go ahead and click yes in the chat for a demo or a follow-up. Either myself or one of my fellow consultants will reach out to you as soon as possible. If you have a specific time or date where you would like to have a conversation with us, you can put that in the chat as well, and we can book a scheduled time with you.